Okay, hello everybody, good morning. Welcome to the third part of the breakfast webinar series. Just had some technical issues this morning. My email went down and a few password issues, but I made it just in time. So a little bit about me. My name is Iain Stevenson. I work for Thames Water in the hydraulic modelling team. It's part of asset management. I've previously worked for Atkins and Mouchel as they were, and I've worked for on and off for a number of water companies through those. Worked for Severn Trent, Southern Water, and Thames Water. This presentation is coming from the Metropolitan branch. This kind of represents the London area of CIWEM. And our aim this year is to try and encourage graduate members and colleagues to get on with and pursue their chartership. So we've had a lot of questions before. Just put this straight at the top. The previous sessions are available on the CIWEM website, and this session will be too. So you don't need to ask that question again. A little bit about the scheme. It's a voluntary scheme. The three presenters, we're volunteering our time, but it's kind of run via the Metropolitan branch. We've got still 9 weeks to go, and D1 and E2 will not be covered, so we're only covering 12. What this isn't, it isn't a guarantee to membership. It's just a webinar series to try and help you think about your competencies and going for chartership, and self-assembly is required. It does need a fair bit of work by yourselves. So this is the competence we're looking at this week. It's B1. So the ability to analyse and evaluate environment and other water problems. And here's a bit of the information that is provided by CIWEM. You may wish to identify a project or piece of work that you've had responsibility, demonstrating you understand why the work is needed and the implications for the potential solutions. As part of this, you should undertake some research to demonstrate you've considered the implications, potential solutions, and other stakeholder perspectives. So it gives you some types of research there, and it also gives you some different stakeholders and different things to look at: legislative, social, historic, environmental, financial. Okay, so the key questions for this competency are: what was the problem or opportunity you needed? You need to be able to describe what your problem was or is or became. What research and investigation did you carry out? What were the main factors? Who were the stakeholders? How did you consult the stakeholders? How did you ensure that the nature and extent of the problem was fully understood? And then a couple of questions. Did you prefer any investigatory work or a brief for investigatory work? And when you were evaluating the problems, what was the importance of professional neutrality? So we've got a couple of examples for you here. Following an asset failure, I was the lead reviewer for the performance of a particular asset type. So here's laying out what the problem is. I circulated a questionnaire to asset owners to reduce any flood risk. So here's speaking to stakeholders. I used the data to develop a 40 million investment plan to replace these assets. While developing this plan, I consulted colleagues and with responsibilities in their fields, which also led to contacts before presenting to directors. So here's looking at just how it was shared and how it was moved forward. I used a range of consultation techniques: face-to-face meetings, site visits, and mass webinars. So it's explaining how consultation with stakeholders here. And once the directors approve the approach, I will prepare a brief delivery of the form in form of a business case. So here's the outcome, which is quite important to do. It doesn't say it here in the key questions, but what the outcome is an important thing to finish off your competency with. Example 2, I'm often called to analyse and evaluate both environmental and water problems in the strategic flood risk assessments I undertake. So here's the problem that is being assessed. Looking at ways to assess this. This work involved analysing flood risk from multiple sources to evaluate the many completing site developments with the local authority to identify more suitable sites for development that would not increase flood risk elsewhere. So again, looking at the problem, but also engaging with the stakeholders, which was the local authority. I do this by employing a range of methods, including practical review and historic flooding, and review of predicted flood risk to all areas based on a theoretical assessment. So this is analysing the problem. I used to promote an environmental perspective to planners and developers and to such as the work. I affected behaviour and cultural changes by demonstrating the opportunities and interrogation of SUDS and water-sensitive urban design principles to development. So this is this is sharing knowledge further, that it's quite important, and like it says, trying to bring cultural change and behavioural change to other teams. Third example, we've got 4 for you today. I review hydrological assessments and developed conceptual hydrogeological models following a field and desk review based review to understand the associated risks of suitable mitigation. So here's laying out the problem, but also stating how they are going to investigate that problem. So it's quite a nice one, one sentence hitting a couple of points. For example, piled bridges have the potential to cause turbidity during construction, so understanding borehole proximity, operational status, regional and local groundwater flow directions, and aquifer transmissivity. So yeah, explaining the problem again, and speaking about stakeholders and how some of those issues are being met. This enabled me to make recommendations, including the need for monitoring strategy, avoiding peak demand summers, and working with operations to use alternative sites during construction. So yeah, finishing off the competency, or this example of a competency, by what the outcome was. Example 4. This is the first line here is kind of like laying out what the problem is. Drought conditions and flooding events can put deployable outputs of water company assets at risk. I project managed, field tested and calibrated the strategic main network model for Severn Trent Water. This included the Mythe treatment works in Tewkesbury that has suffered from a number of flooding incidents. So if you can remember, kind of back to the floods in, I can't remember which year, but yeah, an area of Tewkesbury was kind of cut off from everything. It was just like a little island sat in the middle of a flood, and in the middle of it was Mythe treatment works that feeds a large section of Gloucester, and the treatment works was lost, and lots of people lost their clean water because of it. So the study covered a large geographical area with a number of stakeholders. This required a lot of liaison and coordination with site owners, distribution and supply trunk main teams. The challenging aspect of the project was working around the Severn Trent Water's team daily tasks. This caused a number of changes to the program. So this is explaining a bit about stakeholders, what some of the challenges were, and what those changes caused, which was changes to the program. The logging sites posed differing risks and environments. Specific, clear and precise risk assessments and method statements were used. So this is just outlining other aspects of the project. So it's kind of thrown in a little bit of health and safety, which there's no problem doing. It's explaining some of the issues and how they were met. Aquifers, the aqueducts are high pressure mains critical to Severn Trent Water. So great care had to be taken not to disrupt Severn Trent's operations. A number of the trunk mains ran along main roads, including dual carriageway. Road safety and traffic management had to be considered. So yeah, again, throwing in some of the problems, how these things had to be assessed, that traffic management had to be looked at. And then the outcome, this enabled Severn Trent Water to simulate strategic operations and later merge with other models to create a larger strategic grid model, so it helped them move water around their network. So we missed this a little bit in the intro, but we're talking about being a chartered member of CIWEM, but when you apply, you can also be apply to be a chartered environmentalist, engineer, and scientist. So here is how this competency meets the other competencies for chartered scientists and chartered environmentalists. As you can see there, it's looking at analysis of problems and solution to problems. And the environmental one is looking at it from an environmental perspective, sustainable solutions and environmental trends to develop those solutions. So here's some activities to look at today and to discuss with other people if you can. Identify a project or a piece of work that you've been responsible for. Why was this work needed, and what were the implications of potential solutions? What research did you consider regarding the implications of potential solutions? Who were the stakeholders and what were their perspectives? When evaluating problems, what was the importance of professional neutrality? So that's running through those questions today and just pull out some of those pieces of information. In some ways, identifying the project can be a little difficult, but once you find that relevant project where you've done some research and done some evaluation, it really helps. So yeah, some activities for this week. Spend 15 minutes answering those key questions that we've just looked at and prepare some bullet points to evidence your ability to analyse and evaluate environment or water problems. Some tips for writing your competencies. Always write in the first person. So I'm interested in what you've done, not what your team has done. Be honest about your contribution to the project. Understand why you're doing a particular task. What is the big picture? I think this bigger picture thing is quite important. What you need to do is some projects can be quite small and quite nuanced, but try and think about why that problem's being looked at. So as an example of that is leakage in water. If you work in water networks like I do, leakage is a big thing, but you're going to need to look at leakage as an environmental problem, not just a leakage problem. It's linked to energy and how people use water. So try and think a little more about your topic or situation. Be concise. Remember what you've written. and don't limit yourself to experience your current employer or paid employment. So as we'll probably come to in other competencies, there are things you can do at home. I've thrown in a couple of personal tips here because I struggled quite a lot with my submission. I was looking at it for quite a number of years. So one of the best things is to continually work on your submission. Obviously, you'll be quite encouraged following these sets of webinars. But don't go crazy for a week and then leave it for 6 months. The best thing is to always keep it in your mind and do it slowly, steadily, and consistently. What would help with this is to set a realistic date for your submission. Don't go mad on this. Don't say, oh, I'm going to submit in 2 months. 6 months or a year is probably a better idea to look ahead to. I put a comment here, don't sit back. This is don't sit back at work. Get involved in different projects. Speak to line managers and mentors about other projects. Say yes to things. And as I discussed a few minutes ago, look at how you can diversify and expand your projects into other areas. And track your CPD continually. There's a CPD webinar tomorrow, which I will advertise in a minute, but get yourself a spreadsheet, put a day down, put what it was and what you learned, and continually fill it in whenever you do things like this. So as I said, there's a CPD webinar tomorrow at 12 o'clock, and you can book via the CIWEM website. So can get yourself a little start on CPD if you're not quite sure about what it is you need to do there. There's also the Fast Track Chartership course that's run via head office. So this is a paid offering, but could be very helpful if you think if you're ready to actually put in your application and go for this. So that's it from me for this week. If you just ask a couple of things, you'll get a survey when you log off this. If you could please fill in the survey, it really helps with the series. We got some feedback last week that we've put we've implemented this week. And please make sure you can book 24 hours before the next session. Yeah, don't leave it like me to try and log in this morning and get hooked up. Okay, so we'll now move to any questions and answers. So,
can you see this okay, or do you want me to?
Yeah. Do you want
to
answer the first one?
Okay, I do. So our first question is, can you define professional neutrality? So there's a couple of contexts for this. I think if in the context of fulfilling your CIWEM competency and your application, it's all about your work. So when we're looking at professional neutrality, it's not your company's position, it's your personal position and your personal ethics, how you're working through this. So but this will probably come up in greater detail where we look at one of the later competencies, which is how do you work. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's basically comply with codes of conduct and professional ethics. So that we'll explore personal ethics in greater detail then. But I think for the purpose of looking at B1 today, when you're looking at problems and you're analysing problems, think about it from your perspective as a professional, having a independent point of view. You should never be asked to do anything that that compromises your professional ethics. So focus on that. Sorry, do you want to add anything to that, Ian?
No, that was fine.
I was reading out the question, and I thought that was a bit of a challenge I wanted to chuck you in with.
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't. It's not a major point in this competency. It's it's a little question on the end that yeah, I just think it's an important thing with being a chartered member, but it's not a large part of the competency, I would say. And yeah, just as Jack said, it's that you're not. You'll probably get it into when we do the ethics competency. That will be helpful.
Okay. Our next question then is, when is the next application deadline, please, and where can I see them? Is the process impacted by COVID-19 at the moment, and are interviews happening online? So I'll quickly look this up whilst we've been on the line. The place to find it is if you go to CIWEM's website, you look at membership types, and then there's a frequently asked questions. And the very first question is, when's the next deadline? So I can tell you the next application deadline is the 1st of June. We won't have finished this series by then, and I think that's quite ambitious unless people have got very well developed applications already. So you're probably looking at August onwards, so 10th of August, or the following one is 5th of October, but and the 1st of December indeed. So that they're set out regularly throughout the season. There is a COVID-19 statement at the top of the page that says that regrettably Simon had to postpone all the interviews that were on the 15th of May. In light of the sort of government advice to not have avoid non-essential contact. I believe they are looking at remote online professional reviews. I believe that's what happens where we've got international members and we aren't able to get reviewers locally, so that there already is a facility to do remote professional reviews, and I think that will be moved forward. But watch that part of the website. Once you've got your application in, the membership team contact you directly anyway. So
Jack, yes, it is happening. We are having virtual PRIs. That's all being set up.
Iain, could you possibly put up the activity of the day just so that people can review that while we're going through the Q&A? Just had a chat on that. Thank you.
Okay. Oh no, I clicked on the wrong one. Yeah, no, I didn't. So next one, does the example you use in B1 have to move through to the other B examples as the project develops as one example continuously through? So I think this is saying, if you use an example in B1, do you have to use that for B2 and B3? Do you want to take that, Iain?
Yeah, I don't think you do. It's helpful to have different examples for different competencies. You can try and use it, but I think it would be helpful to have different examples for different B examples. And thinking of this, you normally need a couple of examples per competency, but in this one, personally, I just used one project. One of those examples was mine, and I thought it lent itself well to this competency. And I think it kind of says at the top, choose one project or choose a project. So obviously you can choose two, but this is one where you can sort of use your 400 words to explain one project quite well.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think if you can reference more than one project through the 1, 2, and 3 for the B competencies, it shows just breadth and depth. But I think you could look at different aspects of a single project, as Iain said. But yeah, if you can, just put more in there. Our next question goes to, how far should health and safety play into this question? If, for example, if your example is in a similar emergency situation, the emphasis seems on environmental aspects.
If I can answer that, that wasn't, yeah, there is a health and safety competency, so not a lot, but it's about the health and safety was put in there as analysing problems. One of the problems of the fourth example was lots of different sites, lots of different environments. There was confined space issues, risk assessments were needed, method statements were needed. There was traffic management. So it was about, that was in there to try and explain some of the problems with that project and how they were met. So not a lot of health and safety in this question, more environment, more water. There is a question as well, do project examples need to be recent? I've recently returned from taking an extended career break. I don't think so. Some of my examples are fairly old. So no, I don't think so. You don't actually have to say, you don't have to put dates on them particularly. It's just examples of work you've done. So I don't think there's they don't need to be recent.
Yeah, I think the only criteria for recent is the CPD competence. So I think for the others, we're looking for experience throughout your career, and if you've got the right level of experience from a project a few years ago, I wouldn't have a problem. I wouldn't see an issue with that. I would certainly include it. I tend to be quite vague on dates when I write things like this, but other than the CPD requirement, which is the last 3 years, I don't think there is an issue with that.
I'll look at this question here. Could the B1 example be related to the ones used in A1 and A2? Probably yes. I think A1 and A2 are quite similar in a way, and B1 kind of bleeds into this a little bit. So personally, lots of my stuff's quite similar. Lots of my experience is quite similar. So the answer is probably yes, but as we just spoke about, using different examples to show breadth is helpful.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. We are through all the questions we've received on the Q&A. So if we've got a couple more minutes left. If anyone's got any last moment questions, I'll fill just by thanking Iain again for today and reminding, as you said, to book on for next week. We just had a message through from one of the CIWEM team as well to say that the May PIRs are happening online. So that's an update from there. When I said they weren't happening, the May ones are happening online. It's the first time they've undertaken them on this sort of bulk scale remotely, but anyone who's already been invited to a May PRI, you should probably already be contacted and know about that. So apologies if I caused any confusion there.
Oh, got another question pop up. Can you use abbreviations? The answer is yes, but you need to explain what the abbreviation is. So there was an example I used earlier on, which was Severn Trent Water. Normally you have to say what the client is. So explain it at the top, and then you can use abbreviations later on down in your competency. Yeah, so yes, it is a very good way to save on words. But yeah, explain them in brackets at the top the first time you use it.
Excellent.
Okay.
I think, do you want to wrap up there?
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for attending today. Hope you enjoyed it. And as I say, there's a CPD webinar tomorrow, so take a look at that and see you next Wednesday for B2. Thank you, everybody.
Also, the